Let's welcome Professor Clark from UK to deliver his presentation. Please, Professor Clark.
Thank you very much, Alan, and thank you everybody for tuning in this afternoon to listen to these presentations. It's a great pleasure for me to be here today. You know, people sometimes ask me, well, where do I find the time for all this innovation on top of the busy operational demands of running a department? And I tend to answer as politely and constructively, of course, I hope. But in truth, if people are asking that question, then you've probably got the wrong idea about what innovation is. It is not something that you can just squeeze into your other busy operational day. It is not something you can find ring-fenced time to do, you know, 1 hour at the end of the day or whatever. It's not something that you can do after you've finished all your other operational duties. No, innovation is something that you have to be doing all the time. Every operational task that we have gives you an opportunity to improve safety and quality through innovation. Every teaching duty we have gives you an opportunity to improve safety and quality through innovation. Every time you look at a safety notice, an incident investigation, equipment commissioning, or whatever else it is you're doing, there's an opportunity to improve safety and quality through innovation. Next slide, please. So I'm going to look today at how we've developed in Nottingham a system for doing healthcare technology innovation. And I'm going to give you three examples, three stories, if you like, of what successful innovation looks like, and how we've managed to achieve that here in Nottingham, and what I think is the key thing to making innovation happen in healthcare technology. So essentially, you need three components, I believe, for successful innovations. The starting point has to be the patient. If the patient isn't the centre of your thinking, then you're probably in the wrong business. They provide the opportunity, the unmet healthcare need for us to solve. Then, of course, you need innovators. Now, innovators can come from anywhere. They can come from academia, they can come from research organisations, they can come from healthcare providers. Indeed, they can come from the patients themselves or the patient's family. Most usually, I guess, they come from the university sector. But like I said, innovators are everywhere. Now, you can have a genuine problem, a genuine unmet healthcare need, and you can have wonderful, clever ideas from your innovators. You can have all the fancy technological solutions you like in the world. But if you don't have a means to produce them, to manufacture them, to distribute it, to deliver it to the patient, well, then you might as well not bother. So the third key element that's often overlooked in innovation is you need to have industry. Now, here in Nottingham, we've brought those three components together to create what we refer to as the Centre for Healthcare Technologies. Let's now take a look at a few little examples of how we brought those three components together to enable successful innovation to improve safety and quality. Next slide, please. So in this first example, the starting point for this opportunity to improve quality and safety was the patient, the diabetic patient who happens to have a foot ulcer. And in this slide, we can see on the left-hand side a picture of the foot ulcer, and then the image next to it was obtained using hyperspectral imaging system, and it shows the distribution of oxygen across the foot and across the ulcer, which was developed by the innovators at the university. And this is a hugely beneficial system, devised in a combination between the university academic staff and the healthcare staff in the hospital, and it enables us to know an awful lot about what's going on in the physiology and develop treatment plans for our patients. But the equipment we need to do this is rather large, and the patient has to come into the hospital in order to have these taken. What we really wanted was a system that was small, robust, could be taken by the patient into everyday life, and ideally could be worn by the patient all the time. Next slide, please. So enter our industrial partner. In this case, the industrial partner was a small company called Footfalls and Heartbeats, whose normal line of work is developing smart fabrics, materials that have sensors in them for the elite sports industry. However, working with us at the Centre for Healthcare Technology, they helped us produce a range of fabrics into which we could apply a whole pile of clever sensors to do measurements. Next slide, please. So we've now developed a pair of socks, and in fact, a whole range of clothing and fabrics into which we can put sensors now to measure all sorts of things. We can measure blood flow, oxygenation, pH, a variety of other physiological parameters, and including, in this example, a capillary refill time. So it was by bringing on board industrial know-how to manufacture these products, together with the innovators from the university and the hospital healthcare team, which enabled this to be a successful project. Next slide, please. So in this second example of improving safety and quality through innovation, we call this SurePulse. And the starting point for this example, as you can see here, is a very small premature baby in need of resuscitation. Now, the key parameter, if you need to resuscitate a small baby like this, is their heart rate. And you can't use.
It's been asked that you slow down a little bit for the non-English speakers, but you're doing great.
Sorry, Tom, I do tend to blunder on, don't I? So the key parameter when you're trying to resuscitate a small baby like this is their heart rate. And the difficulty we have is that you can't use pulse oximeters because they don't work, and you can't use ECGs because the sensors, the electrodes don't attach, and they're too bulky anyway. So actually what we rely upon here is the clinician using a stethoscope. It's very old tech, but it works. But the problem with using a stethoscope is, in order to be able to measure the heart rate, everybody has to stop for 10 seconds while the clinician listens. And in those 10 seconds, nobody is helping the baby, nobody is resuscitating the baby. And it's a very critical and a very urgent time. And you lose 10 seconds every time the clinician needs to measure the heart rate using a stethoscope. Next slide, please. Now, as it happened, completely independent to this, we were working with the university and an industrial partner trying to measure the heart rate of miners and other industrial workers who were working in hazardous environments. And we were fitting sensors into their helmets, into their hard hats, in order to measure their well-being and protect the workers. Now, this was just a small project. It was just a couple of PhD students working on this project, and they were giving a lunchtime seminar one day, as is our practice, and quite by chance, one of our consultant neonatologists just happened to be in the room. He saw this safety work that we were doing with the hard hats and the helmets, and he said to us afterwards, is there any chance that you could put that technology into a soft cap that I place on my little babies? Next slide, please. And so the project was formed. Of course, the answer was yes. We could find a way to get this technology into the soft cap on top that the little babies can wear. And the project ended up being called SurePulse because it measures the heart rate using a simple photoplasmometric detector. You can see it's a very simple device, but it fits into the little woolly hats that the babies wear, and it gives us a real-time measure of the heart rate. So now, if there is a crisis and the baby has an arrest, you don't have to stop resuscitating the baby because you can see what its heart rate is all the time. Next slide, please. For this third example of improving quality and safety, this one starts inside the ambulance, where we often have to transport some of our sickest patients. And again, in this case, I'm concentrating on premature babies, on neonates, who are being transferred from remote hospitals into our central referral centre. Now, we treat these babies very roughly when we do this. We put them in a plastic box. We attach the plastic box to a metal trolley, along with a whole pile of other equipment. We bolt that trolley into a tin frame of an ambulance, which is really just a transit van. And then we drive it along busy roads between the hospitals. In fact, we put the baby in a place where the noise and vibration they feel actually exceeds the occupational limits for lorry drivers in the UK. So surely we thought we can do better than that for our babies. Next slide, please. In this project, we turned again to the university sector for the innovators, and we went to the mechanical engineers who happened to be doing a lot of work on transport systems. Now, these boys and girls like to crash things. So they like to crash cars and car seats, and here's an example of them doing that with a child's seat. And they're very strong on measuring what happens to people in cars and transports. Next slide, please. And in fact, they've gone further than that. They've even gone to the trouble of crashing planes in the Nevada desert to measure what happens to people in a plane crash. But this time, we set them the challenge to work on something much more important, we felt. And that challenge was to work with our hospital teams and bring in industrial partners to design a safer, quieter, smoother transport system for our tiny wee babies. Next slide, please. So in this project then, we worked with the clinical teams, we worked with academics from the university, and we worked with industrial partners, in this case, Parade, who made transport trolleys, and Jaguar Land Rover, who of course make cars, amongst other things, and have a lot of expertise in making smooth cars and good suspension. And we brought them all together to make a system which was stronger, safer, with reduced noise and reduced vibration. These are just 3 examples of where bringing healthcare, bringing innovators and bringing industry together leads to improvements through innovation to safety and quality in healthcare. And right now is a good time to mention the way that ideas come about, because in the current COVID crisis, we're seeing lots of examples of people using medical equipment in off-label, in strange ways. And we've started a couple of projects already, bringing our clinicians and our industry partners together to look at what happens with CPAP, what happens with different types of CPAP, the amount of oxygen that we use in high and low flow situations, and whether we can save patients from having to go into intensive care using that. There are opportunities to develop these projects all the time. But successful projects don't happen all by themselves. Like everything else we do that's successful, they require good leadership. So I now just want to take a couple of minutes to look at 3 of the examples of clinical engineering leadership principles that have been so much a part of the work that we've done. Next slide, please. So the first principle, not surprisingly, I've picked up on today is around developing an innovation culture. Now, we have a saying in the UK, which is that from tiny acorns to mighty oak trees grow. And I thought, since I was talking about mighty oak trees, and I come from Nottingham in the UK, I couldn't help but mention one of the most famous oak trees in the world, which is the major oak, which is what that picture is there, which a few hundred years ago was the hideout place for Robin Hood and his merry men. And actually, when I was a little child, I also hid in that tree, though these days it's a protected place and you're not allowed to go anywhere near it. Anyway, what's my point? My point is that successful projects, big projects, important projects, all start with very small ideas. And clinical engineers and people working in our field are really well placed. We're working all day, every day in the healthcare environment. We're coming into contact with little ideas all the time about how we might be able to improve safety and quality. And the trick to developing an innovative culture is to listen to those ideas, wherever they come from, respect them, pay attention to them. Of course, they won't all come off. They won't all become great projects. But if the senior team in clinical engineering is known to be responsive and always listening to these good ideas, then people will keep presenting them to us. And from one of these tiny acorns, a mighty oak in the form of a wonderful project will occur. And as I said, at a time of COVID, there are lots of these examples presenting themselves to us all the time at the moment. Next slide, please. Is it my system that stopped? Next slide, please. Thank you. So the second leadership principle I wanted to focus on was teamwork, and actually in particular on shared goals. Throughout my 30-something year career in this area, it's been apparent to me that there's often mistrust and misunderstanding between those 3 essential components: healthcare, academia, and industry. People are suspicious of each other's motives sometimes. Healthcare often feel that industry just wants to make money. Academics often think healthcare is too slow, too stuck in the past, won't change. Industry often thinks academics are too abstract, too theoretical, and find it difficult to work with healthcare industry, and so on. But despite there being very different approaches from these 3 areas, and you need to recognize and respect those different approaches, all 3 parties deep down want the same thing. We all want improvement in safety and quality in healthcare. The trick to successful innovation and successful working generally is to recognize that in order to be successful, you've got to understand shared goals, and you've got to manage the different approaches that you'll find. If you work with these different people and they come at it in different ways, you'll be surprised how adaptable they and you can be in the pursuit of great project ideas. Next slide, please. And the third leadership principle I wanted to talk about was this one about being humble. And when I talk about being humble, really what I mean for me is at least recognizing your place in innovation, and recognizing your own strengths and weaknesses, as well as indeed the strengths and weaknesses of other parties. More than anything else, the single lesson I think I've learned from working in these innovative projects is that the key to success is actually the role that clinical engineers play. We're at the heart of healthcare. We're on site, we're with patients, we're with clinicians daily. We understand healthcare technology like no one else. But we're engineers, we're scientists. We understand what innovation means. We're used to working with academics. We're used to working in universities. We can speak that language. Some of us are actually academics as well. And on top of that, every day of our working lives, we're dependent on industry to do our jobs. We buy and use commercial equipment all the time. We speak to industrial colleagues all the time about service and support. We understand the needs and drivers of industry. So uniquely, I believe, we have a foot in all three camps. We're naturally at the heart of all three core elements required for innovation. And therefore, we're uniquely placed to be the central driving cog that makes the whole innovation machine work. Next slide, please. So finally, I'm just going to finish with one slide, which is the team of people that actually make the Centre for Healthcare Technology work. There's myself, of course, but then I've got a co-director who leads for research and a co-director who leads for training and industrial liaison. And then the bottom row are the people who do the real work, Tanya, Sarah, and Aditya, who organised the programme for the Centre for Healthcare Technology. Next slide, please. And I think that's everything I wanted to say this afternoon, so thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Clark. Very inspiring presentation. And the three successful medical device innovation examples are evident for enhancing patient care quality and safety. And the role of leadership principles playing in the innovation is also very well addressed. Excellent. Now, let's